MECC's mission and goals to build bridges and highlight the challenges and roles of the churches and Christians within the Middle East were met, although partially. The challenges that MECC has faced, such as the coronavirus pandemic and the mandatory quarantine, the economic crisis suffocating the region, the Beirut blast catastrophe, the economic sanctions, and the spread of hunger in Syria. This year, the General Assembly, which was supposed to be hosted by the Maronite Patriarchate in Kirki, Lebanon, from 16 to 19 September, under the title, "Take Courage, It is I, Do Not Be Afraid," but was postponed due to the pandemic. Instead, the Executive Committee was held on September 18 in Kirki and saw the election of Dr. Michel Abbas as the new MECC Secretary General. The activities and milestones of the MECC over 2020 began with the Executive Committee meeting in Cyprus from 21 to 22 of January. On January 31, the Secretary General, Dr. Suraya Besharani, took a firm stance against what has been called the deal of the century. She stressed that the Palestinian cause is a rightful cause and addressing it through bargaining and trade-offs is unacceptable. On February 12, a delegation from the German Catholic Bishops' Conference visited the MECC in Beirut. On the other hand, the MECC participated in the international conference entitled Impactful Cooperation, which took place in Geneva, Switzerland, at the invitation of the World Council of Churches, Agape and Church Invest Foundations. On March 22, the MECC issued a communiqué for a joint prayer to raise a united prayer on behalf of those infected by the pandemic, their families, the medical staff working on front lines with the virus, and officials responsible for public health. Another statement, joint with the World Council of Churches and regional ecumenical organizations in times of pandemic, urges the churches to avoid becoming tools for the spread of the virus rather than spreading grace. Similarly, our Secretary General replied with affirmation to the message of the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, approving his initiative and claimed what is most needed in this phase is to build solidarity and coordination mechanisms to protect human dignity. On April 22, the MECC launched a call for solidarity and love in order to confront the pandemic in the Middle East and its repercussions on its people. In the time of the coronavirus pandemic, the MECC presidents adapted to the requirements of the quarantine, turning their meetings online. The MECC also joined the Human Fraternity call for solidarity in prayer, fasting, invocation, and charity to pray with the world on the 14th of May. Back to the Palestinian issue, the WCC and the MECC wrote a joint letter appeal to the European Union for firm stance against annexing occupied Palestinian territory. Through all the hardships, the MECC team resumes capacity building trainings via online sessions. Moreover, a message of hope reached Syria with a project of love entitled the Restoration Fund for Rehabilitation of Faith-Based Social Services and Religious Infrastructure Damaged During the Crisis in Syria, in partnership with Kirk and Akti. As a turning point, the MECC can be as firm as loving, highlighting its mission towards the Turkish government's decision to convert the Hagia Sophia Church into a mosque, declaring it as a violation of religious freedom and coexistence. In response to the August 4 explosion, MECC launched a Beirut appeal to coerce the international community to send support, The appeal also discussed the huge burden on churches the event had caused and the extent of suffering, terror, and despair vulnerable citizens are going through. In a gesture of love and solidarity, and as first fruits of the MECC appeal to provide relief to Beirut and its citizens, His Holiness Pope Tawadros II sends humanitarian aid via Egyptian military aircrafts. In the wake of the explosion, a delegation from MECC visits the heads of the damaged churches in Beirut. WCC, ACT Alliance, and MECC released a joint statement in which they offered their collective condolences to the families of the victims in Beirut. Furthermore, the statement announced ACT Alliance's appeal and called upon the rest of the international community to form comprehensive humanitarian mechanism of coordination and collaboration with Lebanese civil society. A new ecumenical committee formed to follow up on Beirut's appeal. MECC and its member churches working together for the relief and reconstruction of the stricken capital. An exceptional MECC Executive Committee meeting replaced the postponed 12th General Assembly in MECC, resulting in solidarity with the Lebanese and the election of Dr. Michel Abbas as MECC's new Secretary General, succeeding Dr. Soraya Basha'alani. The transfer of the ecumenical mission took place in the General Secretariat in Beirut. Consequently, they moved to MECC, where the ceremony of the handover was held in the presence of the members of the Strategic Support Group. The family of the General Secretariat gathered in Beirut for an amicable lunch in recognition of the Honorary General Secretary, Dr. Soraya Basha'alani, and to bid her farewell. Within the handover period, the MECC and Tier Fund launched a cash assistance project to help affected people by the Beirut blast. Moving forward with Secretary General Dr. Michel Abbas, he resumed his first 3 months of the mandate, announcing that being part of the daily life of the Council's work is quite different than being a committee member or a finance supervisor and planner. The Secretary General, during the first 3 months of the mandate, like any newly appointed Secretary General, was overwhelmed with a series of acquaintance and handshaking events, fine-tuning of vital elements related to MECC dynamics such as finance, communication, and organizational chart and discussions, meetings, exchanges related to foreseen activities divided in programs such as agricultural and rural development, refugees and migrants, youth and education, women empowerment, ecology and environmental protection, creation of think tanks and working groups, advocacy and lobbying in order to induce government policy changes, discussions related to database development. The meetings were held with the following organizations: Wilton Park, Bible Society, Religions for Peace, PCUSA, Dan Mission, World Council of Churches, World Students Christian Federation, United Nations High Commission for Refugees, European Parliament, Churches Witnessing for Migrants, ACT Alliance, Gulf Churches Fellowship, and UMCOR. Dr. Michel Abbas started his official visits to the Council's presidents to thank them for their confidence in electing him as Secretary General for 4 years. Therefore, his first visit was to His Beatitude Mar Bshara Butros al-Rai, to express his gratitude for hosting the last Executive Committee meeting and for his readiness to host the Council's General Assembly next year. Dr. Abbas held several virtual acquaintance meetings with the Council's regional offices and the Department for the Service of Palestinian Refugees in Palestine, during which he presented his plan of work for the next 4 years, as well as hosting the virtual meeting of the Ecumenical Committee for the Relief of Beirut. He also participated in a webinar organized by the EPP Group, Intercultural and Religious Dialogue Unit in the European Parliament, under the topic of Lebanon after the Beirut seaport explosion, delivering a speech regarding the political and economic situation in Lebanon, the blast's repercussions, and the MECC disaster relief work. With the emergence of violence around the world, the MECC issued a communique to condemn the abominable crime that took place in France and declared that violence is a crime against God and humanity, stressing that religions are a message of love and peace. In parallel, the Council issued a statement in solidarity with our Armenian brothers in Artsakh, in which the MECC called the parties of the conflict and the international stakeholders to hold the ceasefire, fearing the loss of a symbolic Christian heritage. The MECC team sealed the year 2020 on December 23 with the annual Christmas retreat. Beirut office members attended the gathering in person, while others attended virtually. Being a sign of hope, the MECC continues to be a sign of the resilience of Christian presence in the Middle East and their roots in the cradle of Christianity.